Wolves are the most misunderstood and persecuted animal in all of North America. So we created an environment where a pack of wolves could open up their lives to us. And we set out to capture their intimate behavior, to dispel myths, and show a side of wolves that is often overlooked. This idea of mine, documenting wolves, wasn't supposed to turn out like this. When I took my first steps towards making a film about the gray wolf, I imagined that this charismatic animal would be just another subject in a lifelong career of wildlife filmmaking. Even as the project unfolded, Jamie and I look forward to future work documenting other animals of North America and beyond. But something changed. We became spokespeople for this misunderstood animal. So in the beginning, this was just an idea for a film, a 1-hour documentary for television. But as a subject for filming, the wolves gave us so much more. This is because few other species exhibit such a wide variety of appearances and personalities, and such an expressive vocabulary of both body language and vocalizations. The most misunderstood and persecuted animal in all of North America can tell a pretty good story on its own. We were privileged to be accepted as observers. This is how it all came about. Our life with wolves began over 20 years ago when we started to build a large enclosure in a remote area of Idaho's Sawtooth Mountains. Now, there have been other studies on wolves and there have been other films, but none had taken such a long and intimate look at the social structure of a pack. Wolves, you see, are very elusive. They're extremely afraid of people. And because of this, and the fact that they are so intelligent, it is almost impossible to observe the social behavior of wolves in the wild. For example, if a wolf senses that it's being watched, it'll alter its behavior and most likely depart. Knowing that wolves were so sensitive and knowing that they were also protected as an endangered species, we decided to approach this project in a unique and unobtrusive way. A woman in Montana had inherited a pack of wolves that she got from the US Navy. They were experimenting with them on tranquilizer drugs, and after the project, they were going to euthanize them. So she took the wolves. She'd seen a film I had produced about cougars and thought that I could do some good for wolves, so she contacted us. We raised these wolves as pups, bottle feeding them from the moment they opened their eyes, so they would trust us completely and regard us without fear. The enclosure, which was on the edge of the wilderness, was the largest of its kind and offered a wonderful mixture of subalpine terrain. For 6 years, we lived there with them in a tented camp within their territory. We became a trusted and familiar presence in their lives, and because of this, we were able to observe them without changing the way they were. We let the wolves approach us if they wanted to. If they chose to ignore us, we didn't pursue. They would often make contact by sniffing and even licking us for a moment or two as we entered their territory, but we didn't initiate the contact. Wolves greet each other in exactly the same way. Here, Jamie joins the yearlings in a howl. The bonds we formed with these wolves as pups would last throughout their lives. Wolf Camp was a forever evolving project, and our resources were decidedly limited. Heat came from a wood stove, shower water from a nearby creek, and melted snow. And light and cooking flame came from candles, oil, and propane. So here, under the looming peaks of Idaho's Sawtooth Mountains, with a special use permit from the US Forest Service, we created an environment where a pack of wolves could open up their lives to us and accept us as just another part of their world. We called them the Sawtooth Pack, and we set out to capture their intimate behavior, to dispel myths, and show a side of wolves that is often overlooked.
A wolf pack is a complex social unit, an extended family of parents, siblings, aunts, and uncles. There are older wolves that need to be cared for, pups that need to be educated, and young adults that are just beginning to assert themselves, all constantly altering the dynamics of the pack. Now, the job of maintaining order within the packs falls largely to the alphas. Kamats, the alpha male of the sawtooth pack, bore the responsibility for the welfare of the entire pack, acting as its decision maker and alert for any signs of danger. Shamuk, the alpha female, was the dominant female of the pack. Now, alphas are the leaders of the pack. They maintain stability, they're the most vigilant, and the first to respond to potential threats to their family. Late winter is the breeding season, when the alpha male and female mate. And unlike their domestic dog cousins, it occurs only once a year. And on very rare occasions, if the conditions are right and there's an abundant amount of prey, others in the pack may be allowed to breed. However, in difficult times, when prey is scarce, it's possible for no breeding to take place at all. Howling is something that increases during the breeding season. In the sawtooth pack, a howl would begin with a long, mournful sound, usually from the alpha male. Everything else in the forest would fall silent as other members of the pack joined in a chorus that would swell to a fabulous soulful frenzy. Pups are born as winter gives way to spring, in a litter averaging of 4 to 6. They're born blind and toothless, barely able to crawl. Nestled safe in a den their mother has dug, and often this is the same den the pack has used for generations. Pups just seem to idolize the adult wolves in just about every way. They walk exactly where the adults walk, they sniff whatever flower the adults sniff, chew whatever bone they chew on, and mimic their every move. In this manner, knowledge is passed down from older wolves to younger wolves as they assimilate into the adult hierarchy. Now, the order within a wolf pack hierarchy is constantly reinforced by displays of dominance and submission in a complex language of different forms of communication. Vocalizations such as growls, barks, yips, and whines are equally as important as the nonverbal body language of baring teeth in warning of pending aggression or the tucking of a tail in submission. Those are just a few examples of the broad array of communications that wolves employ to express and maintain their status. But sadly, it's this body language that is far too often misunderstood as being vicious and evil, but really, it's only a language. This is Motzi, the beta wolf, the peacemaker and puppy sitter, or guardian. He was extremely kind-natured, yet very protective of the pups, and highly respected by all the wolves in mid-rank. Now, the lowest-ranking wolf in the pack is known as the Omega. In the sawtooth pack, Lakota held this position for many years. Now, the Omega must constantly submit to his fellow pack members, as he's often dominated by them and treated as a scapegoat. Lakota was most often harassed by a Mani, a mid-ranking pack member, and a bit of a bully. Group howls could be risky times for Lakota, here in the center. He always kept his tail tucked, his shoulders haunched, his head low, his ears back, as he tried to make himself as inconspicuous as possible. But interestingly, the Omega was the instigator of play. And by using play, it helped alleviate pack tension, thus filling a very important role to play within the family group. No other position requires so much diplomacy and appeasement. The better Omega's ability is to coax the others into setting aside their pack hierarchy for a while, the better his or her life will be. This is Wyakin, one of the mid-ranking pack members. Now, the majority of wolves that make up a pack are neither leader nor underdog. Most are these mid-ranking wolves filling this vague area below the beta and above the Omega. The social position of these wolves is more difficult to determine through observation because it's rather fluid. Every wolf in the pack knows its place and the place of all the other wolves. Without the stability of the family, the pack falls apart.
The darker side of wolves has always appeared in folklore, fable, and even in modern literature and films. Misunderstanding breeds fear, and fear can breed hatred. European settlers brought an image of a savage, deceitful, sinister creature to the New World, and the myths grew and grew. Tales like Little Red Riding Hood were passed down through generations, fueling terror. Without even being aware of it, generations of parents have offered the prime example of the big bad wolf in sing-song fashion to their children. This 1933 sheet music of Walt Disney's Three Little Pigs reminds us of the lovable, carefree piglets and the ravenous wolf lurking in the shadows. Today, these fairy tales are modernized to depict a crafty predator that kills for the sheer joy of it. Because we are unconsciously programmed to fear the wolf, we consider it a dangerous animal. Many people still believe that wolves pose a serious threat to human life, despite volumes of evidence to the contrary. Wolves are generally afraid of people, and they avoid them. Along with all wild animals, such as moose, bears, cougars, wolves can be dangerous, but these events are exceedingly rare. For example, over the past 100 years, there have been only 2 cases where a wolf reportedly killed a human being in North America. Wolves are not a threat to humans.
We recognize the face, a broad mask that tapers gracefully into a long muzzle. We've looked into their eyes, bright with curiosity. We understand the message they convey through posture, the alertness seen in an expression or the playfulness of a bow, the confidence or fear betrayed by the animal's tail. We can be forgiven for thinking we already know the wolf, for in many ways, we already do. Genetics leaves little doubt that domestic dogs, our canine companions, are descended directly from wolves. The DNA of any dog is almost exactly the same as that of the wolf. You can see a lot of your dog in the wolf, and a lot of your wolf in the dog. They're both social animals, and just like elephants, gorillas, and whales, they educate their young, take care of their injured, and live in family groups. In a wolf pack, each wolf devotes itself completely to the pups that are born to the alpha pair, making sure that the pups grow up to be strong and beneficial additions to the pack. Only a deeply social and family-oriented animal would demonstrate such devotion to another's offspring. In the Sawtooth pack, 2 wolves were especially close. Motsi, the beta wolf on the left, and Lakota, the omega, often hung out together apart from the rest of the pack. Motsi genuinely seemed to enjoy Lakota's company, and Lakota, normally shunned or picked upon by the rest of the pack, appeared grateful to have Motsi as a friend. Lakota, here in the center, receives a reassuring glance from Motsi, and at times, Motsi would use his size and status to prevent conflicts. And often, Lakota would look to Motsi to make sure that things didn't get too out of hand. Occasionally, the pack would become aggressive with the omega, and these assaults on Lakota would concern the beta wolf, and frequently, Motsi would actually body check the aggressors to stop the fighting. In this case, however, Lakota sank to the ground and worm-crawled his way out of the frenzy. With Motsi, Lakota was free to do things that he wouldn't dare do around the other wolves. He never would have jumped on another mid-ranking wolf's back to instigate play. No wolf in the pack would have stood for that sort of audacity from an omega. Motsi, on the other hand, would just let it pass. Not only did these 2 wolves sleep side by side, but when Motsi went exploring, Lakota often followed. One of the happiest observations that we experienced in all of our time with the pack was the sight of seeing these 2 wolves frolicking together and the look of absolute pure joy on the face of Lakota, freed for a moment from all of his burdens.
Wolves are not only social animals living together as families, they are also a keystone species in that they help manage and bring stability to ecosystems. In the 1920s, wolves were nearly completely eradicated from the American West. And then realizing that the wolf was almost extinct and ecosystems were falling out of balance, the US government captured wolves in Canada and reintroduced them to Yellowstone National Park in central Idaho. Since reintroduction, there have been many improvements to ecosystems reported by various scientific studies. For example, while the wolves were absent for those 70 years or so, elk, having few predators to prey upon them, would linger in the riparian areas along the rivers and streams, browsing on and suppressing the new growth of willow, aspen, and cottonwood trees. Today, the fear of wolves has redistributed the elk. They now prefer higher ground and other places where they feel safer from wolves. Meanwhile, back along the rivers and streams, since the elk moved on, the vegetation has bounced back. Until recently, because the elk would eat all the young saplings, the only cottonwood trees in the entire park were no younger than 70 years of age. Trees now stabilize the banks and provide shade and lowers the temperature of the water, making the habitat better for trout, resulting in more and bigger fish. In Yellowstone, the remains of a kill left behind by the wolves provides needed food for other animals, scavengers such as grizzly bears, wolverines, black bears, and golden and bald eagles, just to name a very few. In Yellowstone, the overpopulation of coyotes has fallen by half. The wolves either killed them or chased them away. This has increased the number of rodents, rabbits, hares, pocket gophers, field mice, animals that provide food for struggling birds of prey. Owls, hawks, and eagles are now doing much better. The drop in the coyote population has also benefited pronghorn antelope. You see, coyotes specialize in feeding in young antelope fawns and their mothers as they try to protect their offsprings. Wolves do not. On top of all these ecological and environmental improvements, having wolves back in the park draws 150,000 new visitors to Yellowstone each year. People that come to the park just to see wolves. This is an increase of $35 million annually to the local economy.
So now I'd like to bring you up to date on what's currently happening with wolves. In 2011, wolves were taken off the endangered species list. For the first time ever, an animal was removed from the list of endangered species by lawmakers, not biologists. The US Congress turned over management of wolves from the federal government to state governments. Now, after wolves were so carefully restored, they're quickly being killed again. Of the 1,700 wolves in the West, hunters and trappers have killed almost 1,000 in just the past 17 months. The states of Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana are determined to reduce this recovering population of wolves to a handful of individuals scattered throughout the vast American West. The Idaho legislature has now allowed trappers to use the carcasses of wolves and even dead wolf pups to bait traps to bring in more wolves, making the quota of 16 wolves if you both hunt and trap even easier to obtain, using their social bonds against them. It's just using what wolves really have that makes them wonderful wolves. Montana currently has a bill in the works that not only prevents a buffer zone around Yellowstone National Park, but allows the use of silencers on rifles to hunt wolves. This isn't about hunters putting a mount on their wall or a rug on their floor. The problem is that several fish and game agencies are enabling those who hate wolves to do maximum damage, and they're validating their hate through anger through this policy. Allowing a single individual to kill 16 wolves in a season, allowing the use of dead wolves to lure their family members to a trap, allowing the use of silencers so the loud bang does not scare off the rest of the pack. All of these things send a message. The message is, it's okay to hate wolves, and please kill lots of them. This agenda is not shared by the majority of Americans, nor is it shared by the majority of residents in those states. Driven by a minority of hunters who kill wolves out of anger and hatred, and by some agricultural interests, this agenda is based on two false claims: that wolves will kill all the deer and elk that hunters prize, and they will destroy the livelihood of ranchers by eating all their livestock. To the contrary, these claims are just not true. Elk and deer populations in Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming, where wolves do mostly live, are either stable or increasing. And where conflicts with livestock do exist, effective solutions are available. Birthing corrals with electrified fencing, the use of guard dogs, and rage riders who keep a vigilant watch over the cattle and sheep are just a very few examples of things that really do work. An unfortunate consequence of ranching on the open range is that livestock frequently die by any number of natural causes, especially weather exposure, disease, and birthing complications. Livestock losses to wolves have turned out to be far less than ever predicted. Less than 2% of all livestock deaths are attributed to wolves, and ranchers are compensated by any loss caused by a wolf. A growing number of ranchers are embracing innovative suggestions and solutions, including the removal of dead livestock which have died of natural causes, instead of leaving the remains behind on the open range for carnivores to feed on. This helps to reduce the learning of bad habits, not only in wolves, but in other predators as well. So to put the population of recovering wolves into perspective, Idaho is home to 2,500 mountain lions, 20,000 black bears, 50,000 coyotes, and 103,000 elk. And over a year ago, before the killing began, Idaho was home to only 1,000 wolves, which has now been reduced by half.
We feel that the most important observation that we experienced while living with the sawtooth pack was to see how these wolves cared for one another. An example of this behavior revealed itself in the very first year of the project with a dark female omega wolf that we had named Mataki. Mataki is the word for shadow in the Blackfoot language. And like all omega wolves, she was the focus of pack aggression, forced to eat last, and often picked upon. As a result of her omega status, Mataki would often go off and be alone in a remote area of the territory. And it was during a time like this that a mountain lion climbed over the fence and killed Mataki. Now, the story I'd like to share with you is not how Mataki died, but rather how the pack reacted to her death. For the remainder of that spring and well into the following summer, their behavior changed and they appeared depressed. Hanging their heads, they drifted about their home in a listless manner. Now, as Jamie had mentioned earlier, we have observed that normally omega wolves instigate play in an effort to diffuse pack tension. Mataki was good at this, and when she died, the other wolves lost the spirit to play. Another indication of their changed behavior was the way they howled. Howling is an exciting time for wolves. They rally together to celebrate the solidarity of their family. Singing together as a group, the howl is punctuated with lively yips and whines. After Mataki died, their howling changed for a time. No longer gathering together, they would howl separately and with very little energy. Their vocalizations had a mournful, searching quality to them, as if they expected Mataki to return. These changed behaviors continued for well over 6 weeks. During the time spent with the sawtooth pack, we watched as the wolves built their own society, chose their own leader, and settled their differences. We've witnessed both physical and vocal interactions, camaraderie, the reaction to death of a pack member, the digging of a den, and birth and raising of pups. We even experienced and saw sympathy. guilt, sadness, and joy. New falling snow always put the wolves in a playful mood. The focus of our project was to examine the individual relationships that the wolves had with one another. And it was here that the more subtle signs of pack unity revealed themselves. Rarely did two wolves pass each other without rubbing shoulders or exchanging a brief lick. Often Jamie and I would see the pack lying together, curled up amongst each other, the head of one wolf draped over the shoulder of another, in a gesture that was both assertive yet affectionate. More than anything else, this is the behavior we hope to reveal in our books, films, and presentations. It is a side of wolves that people understand the least.
We really appreciate you all coming tonight. Thank you.